All right. Hello. Hello. Yeah, there you go. They're here. um, my name, no, the session's name is Write Apex Test using best practices. You guys, Apex developers? Uh-oh. You guys are Apex developers? Okay, good, okay, good. Because I guess that's a prerequisite for this session. All right. You guys on the back, hear me fine? Cool? Too loud? Good, okay, let's get started. So we're gonna talk about today, write Apex test using best practices. My name is Andres Perez. I am a technical instructor. I means that I go around North America throughout the year. I already saw some of you in my class, Chicago, February, right, sir? There you go. Some of you already may have met before because I teach the Dev 401, the Dev 501, and the Dev 502 in North America. With me today is Jyoti Gupta. She is the curriculum developer. Basically, you probably don't know her, but you do know her books because she writes the slides and the exercise guides for the classes that I teach, especially the 501 that I teach. And you've seen this before, right? The harbor is safe, and we'll need to keep it that way. Basically means that if I tell you about any feature that has not been released yet, don't make any purchases decisions based on that information because R&D may pull the switch in the last minute and not release that. So that's what the lawyers make me say. All right. We're going to use an org. That's going to be the first thing we have to do before we actually get started. So I need everybody to open up a browser. Yeah, because, all right, open a little browser there, good. The username, which is printed at the top of the exercise guide you got when you came in, is admin at df13 Apex tests. Make sure there's an S in there, tests. Then the number. The number is the white sticker that is in the top right corner of your laptop. And after the number, you put .com. And the password is tests 2013. So I need you to log in there. Please click on the login button, log into Salesforce button. Anybody having troubles logging in? If you do, raise your hand. If at any time during the exercises later today you have any problem, you know what to do. You need to raise your hand, and there's going to be some helpers that are going to go and give you a hand to log in. All right. So we're not going to do anything else for now on the org. We're going to go back to the slides, and we're going to start talking a little bit about the concepts of testing, and then we will do some exercises. So we're going to talk about some definitions, concepts. We'll do 3 exercises, 4 goals, 5 best practices, and 6 challenges. And at the very end, we'll have a time for a question and answer period. So what is an Apex test? You have written your test code, your business code, that you have to do it on a sandbox. You're not allowed to make those tests on, or that Apex code in a production environment. But in order for your users to benefit from that code, you need to deploy it. And before you deploy it, you must have some code coverage. And that's really the reason you guys are here for, to understand what is that, how we get that code coverage, and what is it that we have to do. And we need to understand what an Apex test is. And it's basically some more Apex code to test your code. So we'll see throughout the session today how you write them, what are the best practices, and all that stuff. So we do provide a Apex test framework, which is an engine inside Salesforce that allows you to run your tests, of course. And in addition to that, you also have some tools like the Forza.com ID and doing from the setup, which we'll do today. And we offer some classes that you can use, including the test class and the system class. Now, most of you, including me, I mistakenly say that we write unit tests. But actually, what we do write are functional tests. So what is the difference between a unit test and a functional test? In Java or C# and other programming languages where you do have that testing concept, you do write unit tests, which are classes in that particular language to test your code in isolation with nothing else going on. And that's really the main difference of the functional testing and the unit testing, and the fact that we, inside Salesforce, we do functional testing. As you probably already know, when you write code, and don't change the code, but you probably add a validation rule, you probably add a different workflow going on or something, it may break your test. And actually, we're gonna see that as one of the exercises later today. So how do you write this code? First of all, being Apex, you have to put that inside a class. And you mark the class with an annotation which is called @isTest, just like seen in line number 1. Now, any code that you write with this annotation will not count against the number of characters that you're allowed to write for Apex. And actually, if you create those tests today, after summer 13, you are mandated to put it in classes annotated with @isTest. Old code that you had in there, you may have, before I think it was summer 13, you may have test methods inside your production code, but you're not allowed to do that anymore. And a test class will have methods that can only be invoked or run or executed during a testing environment. Now, inside that class, the methods are annotated with either the @isTest annotation. So that annotation, the @isTest, can be used for either Apex classes or Apex test methods. They also have other requirements. Must be a static class, returns nothing, so it's void, and it takes no parameters, because the testing engine is not going to expect an answer from the class. It's not going to send any value to the class. Now, what does a test method, inside of a test method, what does it look like? We can take a look at a method and divide it basically in 3 sections. The first section, you're going to initialize your test. You're going to create data that you're going to use during the validation of your code. The second part is where you actually execute and test your production code. And last but not least is where you make sure that the results that you get are exactly the results that you think you should be getting. All right. Something very, very important is that the tests leave no footprint. What that basically means is that even if you do, like you saw on the previous slide, you do inserts or updates, that is going to temporarily make those changes to the records, but everything is going to be rolled back at the end of the Apex transaction. So you don't commit any data. And the SOQL queries can find the records that you're inserting, but once the test is over, nobody else will be able to find those records. What that also means is that you cannot make any callouts to external web services because you cannot uncall them, right? So we don't allow you to make a call. And similar concept with emails. You may have a class for production reasons that sends an email to your customers. When you test that, the email is not sent because we cannot unsend. Although some email clients try to make you believe that you do, they don't. All right. So one of the most important things is that tests expect you to write with mock data that it's fake data that you create during the running of the test, and it's not on your database. So don't put records on your database just for testing. The records should be created on runtime by your Apex code. We're going to see how you do that. Another important fact is that even if you create those records, they will not be able to be found when you do SOSL searches. All right. Now, there's some exceptions to the SOQL rule, which says that you cannot find any records. Actually, you can find some records. And those are users, profiles, information about the organization, and record types. Because your Apex code, for example, that uses a record type, and it's hard-coded somehow inside your Apex code, it's not the same as creating a new record type and working with it, because your code is not going to be working the same way. So for record types, you are allowed to see those records. Same for users. Special user is not the same as creating another one. And then, but sometimes, some rare cases, you are probably, let's put it, forced to use the data inside your own org. Try to avoid it, but if you must, you try to avoid it. But if you must, you try to avoid it. But if you must, then you can mark your code as see all data, at see all data. Best practice, if you do need, did I mention you should try to avoid it? If you do need it, make one class mark as see all data. So you know at least that special cases class and that utility class is the only one that is going to allow you to see that data. All right, so you have written the tests. How do you run them? Well, there's few ways in which you can run them. The first one is inside Eclipse. For the com ID, you go to the classes and you right-click and run test, or go to one class and run the test for that class. You can also do it on the developer console. You can also, and we're going to do it today, you can also do it on the, through the run Apex classes, you can do run all tests. There's also another way that I don't see it in the screen in there, which is the one we're going to use for the exercises, is that you're going to do the Apex text execution engine. And obviously, the tests are going to be run when you deploy. because that's the reason you're writing them. You're writing them because if you don't write enough code coverage, you will not be able to deploy. The minimum is 75% code coverage. Now, that's not the target. That's the minimum. You should always try to achieve much, much higher than that. But in order to be able to deploy, you do 75%. Now, that includes every line of code in your classes and your triggers. If you have a very small class, and one very small class and a lot of big classes, when you do the code coverage, it's possible that that little class is not tested, and still you achieve over 75% code coverage. But the triggers, even if it is one line, you must invoke every trigger. Even if you have like 99% code coverage, and you're just missing one small trigger with one line, you will not be able to deploy. Another important restriction when deploying is that the code cannot fail. So if you make a change to a validation rule in production which makes your code fail and you have like 99% code coverage, you will not be able to deploy because that validation rule is going to break, is going to generate an unhandled exception. Is that for me? Yes, ma'am. The 75% is the code that you can write, which is without the managed packages. Because you don't really deploy the managed package. You install the managed package in production. It's the code that you write. Good, very good question. Good. Thanks. All right. So there's 4 goals to testing. You guys can see the code in there. From here, I cannot see it, the one that's behind the try-catch block. Can you see that? I mean, neither do I. But don't worry, you don't have to. Let's pretend there's a function in there that takes a number and multiplies the number by 3. And it takes a parameter. Rather than taking an integer, it takes an object, which can be an integer, but it can also be a word, right? So the positive path is what happens if we send an integer to that method. It should work. So let's try it out. We do a myTest, which calls that method called triple, and it passes a 3. And it should not blow up. That's goal number 1. Make sure that you don't have governor limits. Make sure you don't have any kind of exceptions. Make sure your code does run. Code number 2 is that function, triple, returns the input multiplied times 3. If you pass a 3 times 3, my math doesn't mess up with my brain right now. That should be a 9. So we need to make sure that the value returned is a 9. And if it is, we just validated that the code does, not only doesn't break, it does what it's supposed to do. Another thing that we should also test on our code is what happens if we have invalid data or invalid data. It should not just blow up. We should be able to handle that gracefully. So in our case, if we send the word hello times 3, well, that's not possible. That's going to fall into the catch, and we're going to properly handle that, but not just blow up. All right, and number 4 is that we should make sure that we don't hit any governor limits when we do bulk testing. As you are probably aware, when you build a trigger, you should always assume the worst case scenario, which is you're going to get 200 records because the user is loading the data through data loader or through the API. We're going to hold the answers to the question. Can you write it down? And at the end of the session, you ask me. Please, thank you. But do write it down. All right, so we're going to test with 200 records. and make sure that we get valid answers. All right, and now we're going to do the first exercise. But before we do that, let me tell you what the exercise is all about. So we have some code, a trigger, that when you create a position, it will fire the trigger. You go to a trigger is position C, assign recruiter region, calls a class, which is called utilities class, which goes into the user's table. From the user, it finds the record for the user who owns that position. And from there, is going from that particular user, is going to bring back a field called region. And it's going to say that the department, the positions department is region. Sorry, the positions region is the same as the owner's region. All right. So in the exercise, what we're going to do is that we already have that code working. We're not going to worry about the code. I'll give you the code. It's part of the org that you already have. What we're going to do is that we're going to write the test for that. So remember, we're going to split it, a test method in 3. In the initialization, we do insert the valid position. In the testing, we assign the region to the user region to the positions region. And then we do a query to validate that it actually worked and that the positions region is the same user's region. All right, so let's get started. Together, I'm going to show you, I'm going to guide you and Jody on what you should be clicking. So the first thing that we want to do is to review the code that review the code that we have for you, the business code. So I need you to go to setup, develop, Apex triggers. And there's one trigger in there, which is called that. We're just going to click on that one, the only one we have. And you will see a few things. Actually, you will see a lot of comments in there. The only line of codes that are not comment, it's a for loop that will go for each position in the list of records or positions that I'm inserting, and call a method in the position utilities called assign region 1. And that's in line number 7. So let's go in and take a look at what that method does. So I want you to click on the Show Dependencies button. We're going to select the link for position utilities. And there is a method in there, the first one, called assign region 1, which is on lines 5 to 12, I think. All right, so what this method does is that it sets the position's record region field to the region field of the recruiter who owns the position. So what do we have here? In line 8, we have a query to bring that data, and in line 11, we just set it up. All right, so this is the class or the code that we're going to test. This is our production code, and we're going to write some test code to code that business logic code. All right, so we go again into develop Apex classes. We're gonna, we need to review a little bit more, yeah. Let's take a look at the test factory, which is a class, a test class. Make sure in line number 1, it says that it's at its test. So this class is written only for the purpose of the tests that we're gonna build. All right, and there is a method called build test user that basically the only thing is that it creates a new user and populates it with some values and returns the user. All right, and there's another one called build test positions, which does something very similar. So you scroll down to line 32, you will see there is a build test position that builds a position. All right. This is something we use a lot, writing code that generates some of the records that we need to work with. All right. So now we're going to actually go and create the code, the Epix test, to test that code. And we go to develop Epix classes. Click in the new button. And we're going to start typing some code. We do @isTest. All right, private class, position C, underscore tests. All right, open brackets, we close brackets, and we're going to have a method in there. So inside of there, we're going to have a method which is going to be defined with the keyword test methods. There's two ways in which you can demarcate test methods. One of them is with the @isTest. We're doing on the exercise the other one. There is totally equivalent, which is the test method. Which one's better than the other one? It's actually identical, so it doesn't really matter. You don't gain or lose anything. So test method, private, static, void, test, assign recruiter region, one, region one, good. And then open close parentheses and open a close curly brackets. Make sure that we didn't make any typing mistakes, I know. We'll click on the quick save. Should come just like that. If you have an error and you cannot find it, raise your hand, and some of the helpers will come running and give you a hand. All right, so then we're going to, within that method, we're going to add some code to create a mock recruiter user who will own the position record. So all we're going to do is create a variable of type user. We're going to call it test user. It's equals to test factory dot, see, we're going to use one of the classes that we saw a little bit ago, dot build test user. That one takes two parameters. The first one, it's an integer, so we're going to see later use creates a lot of them. And then the second thing is a custom recruiter. It's going to be the fields. It's going to be populated with that. And then we insert that record. So after that line, we do insert test user. All right, we have the user. Now let's do the same thing for the production. So production of position. We'll do next line. Good. Position underscore C. Test position. It's equals to test factory dot build test position. Brackets 0. And we're going to send the ID of the user that we just inserted in the previous line. So we do test user.id. Close bracket, semicolon. Let's validate that we have nothing wrong here. So click on the quick save button, make sure that it compiles. Fantastic. So then we're going to, how many lines do we have in here? This 3 lines of code is the first part of your test method in which you initialize the data. Then we're going to invoke the trigger. The way we do that is that we do an insert right after that. Insert test position, insert test position, semicolon. Good. So that's all we need to fire up that trigger, right? Because we saw the trigger is an insert. Fantastic. Now we need to validate that the trigger is actually doing what the trigger has to do. And the way we're going to do that is that we're going to query for the position we just created. So on the next line, we're going to write a SOQL query, which says position underscore C space db position. It's equals to, where are we? Square brackets, select region underscore C from position underscore C, custom object, where ID is equals to, and the ID of the position we just created, so colon test position.id. Close the brackets, semicolon, and we do a quick save. Make sure that nothing's breaking so far. Fantastic. All right. Now we're going to actually validate that the trigger did what it's supposed to do. We fetched the record. Now we need to do a method called system.assert equals. So we do system.assert equals, okay, open parentheses, and we're going to verify that the db position dot region underscore C is equals to, so comma, test user dot region underscore C. And we click save. And it should have worked, or compiled. We haven't run it yet, so we don't know if it works. The next step is actually running it. So let's take a, let's go, it's saved, good. So now let's go into develop Apex text execution. No, thanks, I'm all right. And we click select tests. And in there we check on the position C underscore tests. And then we click the run button. And we wait. All right. Oh, it's waiting, and we wait. Well, 200 people clicking on that button at the same time is doing a little bit of an overload on the system. So it's going to be the interesting part of the session. Hopefully it doesn't take that long. Oh, there you go. I'm done. Or, Jody's done. Are you guys done yet? Yeah? Good, good. What do we have? We have one of one tests passed. Awesome. Now let's click on that line next to the green check mark. Let's click on that one. Yep, and on the bottom we see that we did pass. Fantastic. All right, so that was exercise number 1. All right, good stuff. Now let's talk about, so that's basically what writing test code is all about. But this session is 2 hours and a half, so we need to talk more about tests, and we're going to talk about the best practices, which is actually what the important part is. There is a, well, we talked about this already. You are not allowed to see the data that you have on the org where you're running your tests. It's not a good idea to depend on that data. You don't want to put data there in there. Actually, if you have a very long a lot of records, it will reduce the performance of your tests. So it's a good idea not to rely on the data. And unless you extremely necessary require it, you can do the see all data. We talked a little bit about this before. All right, so what we're gonna do is build mock data. You see here, the code that I have in here, which is on a blue screen, means that this code is the code that you write, is a test code that you write to test your real business logic or your production code. So in here, which is similar to what we just did, we actually create the records. We don't read it from the database. In the exercise you just finished, we only have one SQL query, and that's to validate that the record that we created and inserted, it has the value that we think it should have. But we didn't do the queries on the initialization. We should not depend on data. Good. There's a couple ways in which you can do that. The first one is what we already saw. The second way in which you can not have to depend on data is that you get the data from your production org using data loader, extract it into a CSV file, maybe play with that data a little bit. What happens if this fields this value, this fields that value, get 200 records of those, blah, blah, blah. And then get that CSV file and load it into your static resources so you can use that data. If your code is simple, let's put it that way, and the 200 records that you're going to run with can have very minor details, then you can use the method that we did. But in most cases, you want to test different ifs and else. What if this value is this? What if the record type is that? What if this fields no? Then that data gets a little bit more complicated, and this is a great way of working with that data. So you load into static resources, and all you do in your test code is that you invoke a method called load data from the test class, and you're gonna load candidate__c object, and you just give it the name that you gave to these static resources. That's it. And when you call that method, it invokes the triggers for the candidate. So you actually do that part as well. All right, so not only gets the data from the static resources file, but actually performs a DML operation to insert that data. All right. Another very good best practice, which is what we did on this particular exercise, that we built a utility class. That in our case, it was creating the position and the user. There are two methods that we need to call a lot of times from the test code that we're going to write. All right, good. Best practice number 3. When you create a test class, it's not mandatory, but very good idea, best practice, to give it a name which is the same name as your class, but ended in underscore tests. What does that do for the system? Nothing. So what you want to do it? So that when you view your classes in alphabetical order, they're listed one after the other, and you can easily work with those. All right. Best practice number 4 is to demarcate your, so remember we were talking about initialize, execute, and validate. The execute should be surrounded between a start test and stop test. Why? It does two things. For now, we're going to concern about one of them. Later I'll tell you what the second one benefit of that is, but for now, it uses its own set of governor limits, which means that let's suppose that you have 100 SQL queries per transaction. I think that's actually the number. Don't memorize these numbers, I always look them up. But it is 100 SQL queries that you're allowed per transaction. If you do, in the first part, you do 95, then you only have 5 for your execution, which is something you don't really want. So you're going to get a new counter, counter B, for your validating your production code, because at the end of the day, the business code that you write has a limit of hundreds of queries, not 5, because we already took the other one off, right? And after you're done with your production code, you do a stop test. And what that does is that it continues with the previous counter. So you don't have like 3 counters. You only have 2. One that gets reset for your business code, and the other one for your test code. That is the sum of the initialization and the verification stages of your test method. All right? And oh my God, if I've seen, did I tell you that I used to work in developer support before I was an instructor, helping Apex developers? And one of the things that I saw a lot of times was they were having problems because their tests were so long and did so many things that making a minor change will mess everything up. The best practice here is have a lot. We don't penalize the number of test methods you have. Use a lot. And each method does one thing, only one thing, and does it well. Just like one of the pillars of object-oriented programming, which is does one thing, only one, and does it well. And you can have a lot of them, many of them. What happens if the data is this, or what happens if the data is that, or what happens if this or that, right? So have a lot of them. Very short, very simple. Reuse your utility classes for the common things that those methods do, but have a lot of simple, small tests. It's easier to work with, believe me. I've seen it. All right, so then now we're gonna do exercise number 2, which is going to mess up a little bit the code that we have. Everything is working fine, but we're gonna do something that is not in the code that is gonna break your code. This is the kind of thing that I was talking about before. So one of the things that we're going to do is that we're gonna check the owner's field, one of the values in the owner's field. But as you know, an owner can be either a user or it can be a queue, and that's really what's going to mess up a little bit things there. All right. So our triggers will fail. So what's the problem? So we create a position that it doesn't have a department assigned. Then the trigger that we wrote goes into the user record, and based on the owner ID, brings that user that owns that position. And then we have a workflow rule that says that if the department is null, make the record be owned by the queue. So now when we do that same query, there's a problem, because it's not a user, it's a queue. So we don't touch the code, but we just take a workflow, and that will break our code. We're gonna see that in a minute. All right, how are we gonna fix that? Well, we're gonna fix the position utilities class that handles the department being null, and then we're gonna update the factory to set the value for the department. All right, so similar concept, we have, we insert a position with the department equals to null, then it goes here and the workflow sets that to queue owned. Then we'll verify that it actually does say queue owned and it did not crash just because we made it that workflow. All right, so let's do it. Exercise number 2. So the first thing we're going to do is that we're going to activate our workflow rule. So here, go to setup, go to create workflows and approvals, and go to the actual workflow rules. So scroll a little bit, Jody. Go to create workflow rules. Click in there. We don't need this, so we click continue. Good, we're in our workflows now. There is a workflow called department is null. It's actually the only workflow in there. So we click on department is null. Let's take a look at the criteria. It's gonna run, the rule criteria is gonna run if the department is equals to null. What is it going to do? Yeah, exactly, right there, department equals to null. And what is it gonna do? It's gonna do a field update, which is called what? Set owner to recruiter queue. Let's click on that one. It's going to update, it's going to update a field. The field is the position's owner. No, I went to the top, right on. And the field value is gonna be the recruiter queue. All right, but so far it's working because we haven't activated. So let's go back to the department is null workflow, correct, and we activate it. All right, now let's go and run the test. We didn't change, look mom, I didn't make any changes to the code, but it's gonna break. All right, go to the develop Apex test execution. And click on the select tests, it's a button, and click on the position test, good, and then we run it, and we wait. And we wait. And we keep waiting. Come on, you can do it. I believe in you. It failed. Wow. Let's click on the positions test, and then we'll see that it failed with a query exception. Oh my God, why? I didn't change my code. All right. So now we're going to go and fix it. Oh no, we're gonna make sure that this is also working. It's not just our code that is broken. It's also working on the browser. So let's go to the browser. Let's go and create a position. Positions tab, and we'll click new. Technical positions is awesome, so let's click continue. We'll call it title test 1. We need to set the status because that's a required field. We set it to new. Hiring manager is Madame Amy Lojak. And job description, very interesting job. She does stuff. All right, we click save, and we see the new position. Oh, actually we don't see the new position. Because why? We have the same issue. Somewhere in there, say something about a query exception. There you go, right there. Thanks, Jody. Good. So actually our code, not just the test, but the code broke just because of workflow. So you probably experienced this on your own orgs that administrators are a validation rule and nothing works anymore. So gotta go and fix the code. So that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to go back to the setup, develop Apex classes. We're going to edit on the utilities, position C_utilities, click edit. Now let's take a look at that code. Can you make sure that both pieces of code are on the screen, Jody, please? Scroll this scroll bar here. and go up on the other one. So if you take a look at the assigned, okay, if you take a look at the assigned region 1, you will see that it's getting a position, and it gets the recruiter based on the position's owner ID, and from the recruiter it sets the position region to a recruiter's region. Okay, now we can scroll a little bit, please, and we'll see that the method 2 is actually gonna do the same thing, but now we're gonna put a try-catch block, so that we do kind of the same thing. We go into the user based on the owner's position, get that and assign the region. But if that failed, now we're gonna catch that inside a catch block. And we're gonna say, oh, we had a query exception in the debug log. And we've hard code the value of the position's region to something, say, Q on. So I don't know what the region is, because there's several people in that queue and they have different regions. All right, good. Now let's go to develop Apex triggers. And we're gonna click on the trigger that we have in there. And we click edit. All right. This is what I want you to do. It's very simple to do, but a little bit confusing to explain. So comment that line number 7, comment that line, okay, and uncomment line 8. Good, and click save. Make sure we're running with line assigned region 2, not assigned region 1. All right. Now we're gonna need to make another change on the Apex class test factory. So we go to develop Apex classes. We go to test factory, and we click on the edit button. And I need to go to line 7, I think. Oh no, 17. Where's hiring manager? Line number. What am I not seeing here? Is that what we have to do? 30. Oh, 37. Thank you. There we go. Okay. After line 37, so we're going to put something on line 38. We're going to set the new positions department. So new position dot department underscore C department. Actually, it's called department underscore C equals to sales. Now, what are we doing this? We're talking about that if the workflow has an empty department, then we set the value. But now we're setting the department to sales, so that will never fail. Well, actually, we're going to test both conditions. Here, we're going to test where we actually have a department equal sales. Later, not right now, but later on the exercise, we're going to copy that method and change it to make sure the department is null, and we test it there as well. So let's save this. And run it. Go to the develop Apex text execution, select the test, click the check mark, or click run. Select test, position test, and run, and wait. And wait. How's it going? Good question. Let me ask the people. Does the people know if you can get that you can get the slides from Chatter? There's a in the Dreamforce app, there is a Chatter for this particular session. You can download all the slides that you're seeing on the screen. Thanks for mentioning me that. that make me fill the gap that I had to wait for that thing, so it doesn't look bad anymore on me. Good. So we now have that running. We click in there, and we see that it actually passed. Good. Well, but now let's break it. So now we're going to go back to the class, to the position_C tests. So click on develop. Step number 4. Click on develop Apex classes. Click on the position_test. Click edit. All right, and what we're going to do here is copy that method and paste it below. Entire method. All right. Make it a little bit pretty. Good. And we have to name it region 2. Otherwise, it will not compile, obviously. All right. So in that, in that code, in line 13, in our case, line 13, after you do position test user right after that, correct, and before we do the insert, we're going to set the department to null. So test position dot department __ C equals to null. And that's going to fire our workflows. Do a quick save, make sure that we didn't break anything. All right. Now, we should have put it, or we need to put, right after that line that we just typed in, equals null, the next line is the insert, the position. That's going to execute our code. So we need to surround that line between start test and stop test. So let's do test dot start test. Remember, this has to do with the governor limits. Start test and stop test after the insert. All right. Now, if you remember from the code that we saw a few moments ago, the assert here is going to, the last assert on our code, line 19, that's going to fail because this is being a null department. The region is not going to be the user's region. It's going to be Q owned. So make sure you change that. Line 19, Jody. At the end of that system that asserts, correct. Change test user dot region, correct. Test it for, change it for Q owned. And we're ready to save. And we're ready to see the washing machine. So let's go to the develop Apex test execution. Select tests, position C tests, and we click on the run button. And we should see that 2 tests executed and passed. Well, we see the washing machine, but. The question says, why do we have to set up the department to null? We wanted to set the department to null so that we force the workflow to fire, which changes the user to the queue, which makes the so-called query that you're going to write fail, and that's what we're testing. Oh, you know what? I never believed in default values. You're absolutely correct. If you don't set it, it is the default value. But what if it isn't? What if the field has a default value or something else does? So I never rely on default values. I always initialize my variables that I'm working with. You don't really need to set it to default to null because that's the value by default, but I never believe in default values. I've been burned by that before. Say, oh, that was the default value. Oh, no, but it was changed. So, good. Did it run? 2 tests out of 2 tests? Fantastic. All right. We can go back to the slides. Keep talking. Well, I've been talking all day. All right. So we're going to see some of the challenges that how are we doing on time? Jody, can we take a break? It's an hour and a half left. Let's take a break. You guys have been awesome. Now, do come back, please. We still have some challenges that we need to talk about. So we'll take 10 minutes break. Anybody has a clock? Watch. What time is it, sir? 2:30. Okay, so be back in 10 minutes. All right. We're going to be back in a couple minutes, so get settled, please. Is everybody back? Who's not here yet? Good. Good. All right. So we'll continue. Now the next set of slides will show you some of the challenges that you will face or have already faced when writing test code. The way we're going to do this, just to make it a little bit clear, is that we're going to have the code color-coded. Now the code that is blue will be the code that the test code that you write to test the gray code, which is your business logic. So when you get when you get in a project or you get paid to do some work as a consultant, you write code to solve a business need. That code is gray. In order to deploy that gray code, you need to write the blue code. All right? Good. That makes sense. Cool. So the first challenge is testing Visualforce controllers. As you know, one of the reasons you write Apex code is to be the controllers in the model view controller design pattern. And in the Visualforce page, you have curly brackets bang to call the getters and the setters and the action methods. So how do you call those methods? Or maybe those properties, depending on how you code your Apex code. Basically, you need to create an instance of your controller, line 1. Then you do a set name or a set account if you wrote your getters and setters like that. If you write them in the C# form, they're just variables. You assign a value or you get a value. The action methods, you just invoke them from your instance by invoking those methods. Now remember, and we'll see this in a minute, that action methods in the controllers do two things: data and navigation. The navigation is controlled through the return type, which is a page reference. So you can check that page as well. All right, which is, no. A special type of Apex controller that you write is a controller extension, which is nothing fancy except for the constructor, that it takes the controller, standard controller, as a parameter. So how do you instantiate that? You need to, before you can create an instance of your controller extension, you need to pass a standard controller, because that's what the constructor expects. But in order to get a standard controller, you need to create a new instance of the standard controller, which expects a record. Before you can do that, you need to create a record. And if your Visualforce page, it's for editing a record. If it is for creating, you just leave it like that, but if it's for editing, you populate the fields that you need to test, obviously, in there. All right, and once you have the instance, then you call your getters, setters, and action methods. All right. Now, one of the things that a controller does is that it can take a look at the query string parameters by doing Apex pages, current page, etc. And in our business code, we're going to get the value of the page, or maybe the parameters, and we need to get that page in here, so we need to send it in the test. We're going to say, if you ask for the current page, this is the current page. The way we do that is that we, in blue, square on the bottom, line number 2, we set the current page to a page reference that we defined the previous line to be the address or the page for a Visualforce page called My Page. Continuing with that same idea, if you're expecting a parameter, let's say the ID parameter, then you need to not only create an instance of the page reference in line 4, but you need to put the ID, the value that you need, before you set the current page. Right? So setting the current page is so that the controller that you write can ask about it. Continuing with Visualforce, as I mentioned before, the action methods on a controller do two things, data and navigation. The navigation is controlled through the return type of that method, which is a variable of type page reference. So how do you know that you are actually sending the user to the page that you want them to send them? So line number 4, you're going to assert that the value that you get back, no, line number 5, that the value that you get back, it's the page that you think you should be getting. All right? So line number 4, if it is success, and line number 4, if it is a failure. And you and test controller save, that's the action method. It returns a page reference. You get the URL, and that's a string that is going to take you somewhere. Then you make sure that that string is the same thing as the URL that you get for your page success. Or in line 6, do exactly the same thing, except that you want to see if it is the failure page that the users get sent to. All right, so that is Visualforce. 5 things that we need to take in consideration when working with Visualforce controllers. Now, when you test Sozzle, as I mentioned before, if you perform a Sozzle on your business code, and that's here on line 4 in the gray box, do a find, that is always, always, always going to return you nothing. Right? So it returns an empty list of lists of objects, but it's empty. So that's kind of useless if you want to see that actually you're getting back what you think you should be getting back. So what you can do is that before you actually call the method, you say, Apex, if somebody ever asks you through a SOSL about some records, these are the records that I want you to find. So you provide the fake result IDs, which is a list of IDs. Now that list is a single list. Remember that the returns for a SOSL is a list of lists of S objects. The one you're providing is just a list of IDs, and it can be a list of IDs of accounts, contacts, whatever in the same list. They do not have to be for the same object or S object type. All right. I mentioned before that the start test and stop test, one of the benefits or one of the usage is for controlling the governor limits, but it's not the only usage. The second usage is what I'm talking about right here. So let's suppose that on my business code, I have a method called doAction, but it's a future method, and it's going to do some process. When you write your code, you need to validate that that is doing what it's supposed to be doing. So you invoke the method. When do future methods run? After the current transaction is done. And when you need to test to see if it did what it's supposed to do before it finishes. Good. So what we need to do with the stop test is that we make that a synchronous call. It's not going to be called in the future after some time after the transaction is over. It's going to be done right now. So instead of being asynchronous, we make it right now synchronously. With a similar idea, not only for future methods, but also for batch Apex that runs, obviously, in the future. Now, with batch Apex, there are few considerations that we need to take into account. First of all is that you guys done batch Apex. You have 3 methods: start, execute, and finish. On this start, you load the records that you're going to be working with, which are going to be a whole bunch of records. It's a good idea that on the start method, rather than doing the query in square brackets, you do database.query, and you pass the so-called statement as a string, so that when you run it through a test mode, you can specify the string that you want that thing to run with. And of course, you do the stop test to make it synchronous. Make it sure it runs now rather than later. So you can assert what it did. All right. Another challenge that's important to understand has to do with callouts. As I mentioned in the beginning, in a test, you cannot make a callout because you cannot uncall. So how do you validate or how do you test your production code that does a callout and that you get back where you think you should be getting back, and you process those results? You do write a class that implements a mock for the HTTP callout mock, has one method called the response. It receives a request and sends a response back. So if you're doing like a REST HTTP, you know that you do a HTTP send, which sends the request, gets a response back. It calls an external system somewhere, not inside Salesforce, but somewhere else, and it sends a response back. When you do it in a test, it doesn't go all that way over there. It just goes to your method and back. So your method will be able to do stuff like maybe set the body, maybe set the headers, set something else, and it returns that response. Once you have that method built in your test, before you invoke the callout or the method that does the callout, you're going to set your mock to a class that implements an HTTP callout mock. This is fixed, but it's a new instance of your class that you're defining on the box above, right? So rather than going all the way to your intranet or whatever, it just stays within Salesforce and fakes a response back. All right, another thing that is important to understand has to do when your business code works in a with sharing mode, which means that you're following the user's context. When you do a with sharing, you do a query, you only get back what the user can see. So you want to test that. How do you do that? The issue has to do with the fact that you need to specify, if you are running, I want you to see these records. If you're running, I want to see these records. So you can have a user that you define here, maybe the class that we already saw before. Then you do a system.runAs. I want this part, line 9, to run as you. Then I can change the user and run it as you. And you should see something different from what you see. That's what system.runAs is. Or maybe you shouldn't see any data. Or maybe you should. Depends on what you're trying to do. All right, time for another exercise. We're going to make sure that everything that we have done works in bulk. Because remember, your triggers can run with up to 200 records at a single time, and that may give you some governor limits. So we need to make sure that if we insert 200 valid positions, it doesn't choke. We don't get any governor limits. All right, so the trigger will do the query, the same thing that we have done before. And then, did it work? Did we avoid the governor limits, or did it fail? Now, the problem that we have right now is that in our code, when we do insert a list of positions, that calls a trigger for each record in that trigger that new, it calls that method. And the method for each position, it does a SOCO query. You have put a SOCO query inside a loop. It's not a good idea. Actually, it's a bad idea. All right, so how are we going to fix that? We're going to change the query so it's not equals to an owner ID. It's in a list of owner IDs. Ready, set, go. So the first thing we're going to do is that we're going to take a look at our classes and take a look at how they're built. So we go to develop Apex classes, set up, develop Apex classes. Fantastic. If you have any issue, if you get stuck, please raise your hand. Somebody will come running and give you a hand. All right, so where were we? Apex classes. Click on the position C_test class. And then we click on the edit button. And we're going to create a new method, which is test assign recruiter region 3. So I guess you can copy that. Yeah, that's a good idea. Copy that, paste it. Make sure you change the name of the method to a 3. To a 3, fantastic. Now we need to create not a position, but a list of positions. So we do list position __ C, list position __ C. We're going to call that test positions. It's equals to new list position. underscore position underscore C, and parentheses, and semicolon, and let's see if it works. Click on the quick save button, please. Compile, to make sure that it does compile. Fantastic. Now we're going to populate that list. So we need a for loop. Right after that, we're going to do for integer I equals 0, I less than 200. I plus plus, close the parentheses, open the brackets. Inside of there, we're going to create one position, which is called position underscore underscore C, test position. It's equals to, now we're going to call our factory, which is test factory dot build test position, parentheses, I. So the I will be the incrementer or the counter in our loop, and we do test user.id. We close parentheses, semicolon. Then we just have it, but we need to add it to our list. So we do test positions dot add, and in brackets the test position that we just created. Let's do a quick save to make sure that it's working the way we think it should be working, or compiling at least. It worked. Good, fantastic. Okay, so we have that running. Now we're going to invoke the trigger. We need to do a start test, a DM operation, which is an insert, and we do the stop test. So test.start test. Next line, we insert the list of positions, insert test positions. Without the parentheses, there we go. Insert, did I say insert dot? I was reading what you were typing, I'm sorry. Insert test position, semicolon, and test dot stop test, parentheses. All right, make sure we didn't make any mistakes. We can. Did it quick save, Jody? We're good? All right, so after this stop test, now we need to validate that it did work the way it was supposed to work. So we create another for loop, but in this time, it's going to be a SOCL for loop. So we do for parentheses, position underscore C, db space, db position, colon, good, brackets, select region underscore C from position underscore C, where, and this is the other place where we do the in a list of IDs. So we do where ID in colon test positions. Positions. All right, we close the square brackets, close parentheses, no, not semicolon, parentheses, and we open curly brackets. And for each position, we're going to assert that the region is what I think it should be. So we do system.assert equals, and we're going to assert that the dv position dot region underscore C, it's equals to test user dot region underscore C. And can we save that? Will it compile? Click on the save button, and it did compile perfectly. Now let's run that test. We'll do the washing machine again. So we go to develop Apex test execution, and we do the same thing. Select tests, Click on the position C test, click run. And it will see that it works beautiful. Cross your fingers. Make sure that it works, because it won't. We keep waiting. Do you know any good jokes while we wait? Oh, this one's taking longer. Oh, yeah, of course, it's doing 200 positions, right? 200 times 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, I think we can take a question while that thing spins.
You talked about web services callouts.
Yes, I talked about web services callouts.
Can you do it for a SOAP too, or is only for the one that test?
You can also do it for the.
SOAP calls.
I know what we're talking about. I'm just thinking, because I've done it for the REST, in which it has a method sent that you get a response back. I think that it also works, but when you build the body, you must make sure that it's. So this is what I do. You call that SOAP web service through a tool like Fiddler. I don't know if you ever heard about that one. That will give you the body of the SOAP. Copy that into your code or something so that you return that, because otherwise, when it gets the response and it's not an XML properly formatted, it's going to blow up. So you need to make sure that one works. Correct. Oh, it didn't work. You made it fail. You distract me. No, I'm just kidding. What happened, Jody? Oh, too many SOCL queries. See, this is why we need to do the testing on with a whole bunch of records. All right, so now we're going to go and take a look and see why it failed. So going to the develop Apex classes. Click on the utilities, position C utilities class. Let's take a look at the method called assign region 2, which is on line 14. All right. So what is that thing doing? It's taking one position, and it's doing a query on that position, and if it has a try catch, because if it is Q, we need to set it to Q only if it is made by Q. But we're doing that query 200 times, which is a big no-no. So now let's take a look at the next method, which is called the assign region 3. All right, now we take as an input not each position and call this method 200 times. We take a list of positions, we call the method once. Inside the method, we go through each position on line 39, and we get the owner ID, put it into a list of owners. Maybe it's a set. It's a set of owners. And then on line 44, we do a query, but now we're doing a query using an in statement, line 44, and we put that into a map. When you do this, this is really cool. I like it. I don't know if you've seen it before. When you have a SOCL query as the constructor of the map, the ID of, in this case, the user is the key of the map, and the value will be each of the records. Before I learned this shortcut, I used to get a list, go through a list, and put it into a map. But of course, this one does it automatically for you. So we're going to have one query, which is line number 44, and then we do have a loop on lines 46 to 55 or whatever to process that. All right, so let's use that method. So let's go to the develop Apex triggers. Click on that trigger and click edit. Now we're going to comment a line in Apex. You're probably familiar with there's two types of comment in line. / if you want to comment one line, and the one we're going to do now is a block comment. So before the for loop, put a /*. Good. After the curly brackets in line 9, put a star /. Good. And then uncomment line 11. So that we're now, so that we're now invoking that method with the number 3, which is the one we just took a look at it, sending the whole list of trigger.new. And we click save. And hopefully that works. And we run it. So go to develop, where are you? Develop Apex test execution. I think by now you know the drill. Click on the insert select the position C tests, run, and wait. And wait. And keep waiting. Again, we're doing 200 records, so that takes a little bit of time. Times 200 people that are in this room, I guess. Ding dong, ding dong. Okay, it's time to make a good joke up. You know how many Salesforce or Apex developers does it take to change a bulb light? 0, because that's an infrastructure. We don't care about hardware. It's the cloud. Another joke? No, it's not good. Oh, because the next one was a bad joke. You thought that one was bad. All right, we passed. Fantastic. Awesome. Go back to the slides. So, key takeaways. When you create a test, make sure you hit the 4 goals, the 5 best practices, and the 6 top challenges. If you didn't take a note of what those were, download the slides from the chatter group in the Dreamforce session where each will review those things again. And you will be using tests to identify the problems before they go into production, or maybe fix them because the administrator a year later decided to create a workflow or another validation rule that is going to fail your code. And you can also test it or use it to verify the bulk readiness of your code. And we are done. All right. So my manager wants you to tell her how awesome I am. So I will ask you to do a little survey for me. Go to your org, click on the Home tab. Go home, don't go home. Go to the Home tab and click on the course survey. Is that it? And then I'm not going to tell you how else to fill this. I told you too in this session how to click everything except the, oh, you are going to do that. You're going to get me in trouble. If you need help trying to understand how to fill that form, there's a good thing here on the screen that you can take a look at. All right, good. And then you click on the submit button, which is somewhere. Now you need to resize the other one. You can have to move it around. Resize the window. There you go. And once you have graded, then you click on submit. All right, so let's go back to the slides, Jody, please, and see what else I have to tell these guys. This is one of the sections that we teach in a class called the Dev 501. Talks about a lot of Apex stuff, how to do the test, but how to do their stuff, how to do the queries, how to do the triggers, the REST and SOAP API calls, and all that stuff. So if you want to, you're welcome to take a look at that. Chris Berry, where are you? Have you seen that guy before? He's a very famous actor. In iTunes, that class is in iTunes, that you can go and watch it for free. You don't have to pay to go to, you have to pay to go the class, but not to watch the video. It's totally free, except the reason you want to come to class is because in a video, you cannot stop a video and ask questions. Well, you could stop it and ask it. I doubt it's going to answer the question for you. And good. Now we are going to open the floor for a Q&A. We're done. Questions? Raise your hand, and there will going to be a microphone flying, well, I mean, walking your way. How do you want all of them? If you ask a smart question, underlined, you get a free T-shirt. Here's a question right here. Oh, where's the microphone? Where's the microphone? Start.
Hello. I was just wondering, I know there was a problem with Salesforce test when you're basically you're looking at your test coverage for the whole org. I was wondering, you know, if that's going to be like resolved at some point. Because if you're trying to find out the total test coverage that you have for an org with all the individual tests. Uh-oh.
I didn't understand your question. I'm so sorry. Can you rephrase it or repeat it?
Yeah, basically, if you're trying to find the total test coverage that your org has.
If you want to have a higher code coverage than your org has, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And basically so you would get all your test coverage of all your individual tests, and that would give you your total coverage. But basically, at the minute, as far as I was aware, that wasn't working properly. Well,
the total coverage is the addition of each of the individual coverage. Now, the way I explain the code coverage in class, and I do have a whiteboard, but here I don't. Let's suppose that there's a class here, and another class here, and another class here, and another class here. Put them, print them out in one of those old printers that is like white and green paper. So all one little, very large, long paper. Start counting the lines that you do hit. You have to have 75% of those. So if you have 100%, no, we don't have. If you have 100% of a lot of small classes, but there's a big class that has 0, that's going to give you actually a very low score because it's counting every single line of all your code. Does that make sense? Is that kind of what you were asking?
Yeah, it kind of does make sense. But what I was kind of asking is, I think you can actually find the total test coverage, and it gives you that result. But the point of that result was ambiguous, and it wasn't a true reflection of what your total test coverage is.
Okay. Now, the code coverage, when you run all tests, the code coverage gets calculated and stored. And that value can get old because when you make changes to your class, the number does not get updated. So if you add more lines of code, that code coverage is not going to be up or down. In order to get an accurate current counter, you need to run all tests again. Not just the run test for this class, but run the test for all the classes again. And that will give you, if you want to rely on that number, do a run all test, and that will be the number that you need to rely on.
Okay, no, that's grand. Thank you.
There's another microphone here in front. He gets the t-shirt. Yeah, that was a very smart question. Is there another? Oh, you can ask me.
Okay. One of the options that we ran across is there's the option for parallel testing.
Okay.
Non-parallel testing. And the options of the test and it runs all tests concurrently.
Yes.
That any advantages to one or the other?
The parallel testing. Chris, you know anything about the parallel testing?
We used to be able to run tests synchronously, but no longer.
No, they're now asynchronously, and probably they are running in parallel, so you cannot make them serial. I don't think so, but your questions say that.
Large factory class.
All right.
And very, very many small tests.
Right.
Classes
Right.
against it. I run across collisions per se.
Oh, okay.
Whereas the instantiation of the test objects start getting accessed by different test methods at the same time.
I was not aware of that. I was not aware of that. So we're talking, two guys here in the front are talking about the fact that tests do run in parallel. Can you turn it off?
Yes.
I'm learning something new today.
Execution options, we had this here. And we had to do that too because we basically.
Okay. So during the exercises, we went to develop Apex text execution. There's an options button, I presume, that opens a little pop-up window where you can disable tests being in parallel, because by default they are parallel, but you can go to that checkbox and check it and they become serial so that you don't have collisions. I just learned that today. Thank you, guys. You should be here and I should be there. Will there be any? Well, there will be a reason if you're running on this gentleman's issue that they are running in parallel and colliding against each other, then that will be an issue, and you do want to make them run in serial mode. That's what I just learned. Good. Now they should get a jacket because that was a very smart question. But no, there's no jacket, so no, take my jacket.
I have a question here.
There's a question, yes, ma'am.
Yes. So the last test method you have, the region 3. After the stop test method, we have a so-called query call. So this so-called query call is not counted towards the government limit. Is that right? After the stop test.
Jody, can you go back to the exercise?
Yes. Thank you.
Which is, go back to setup. Develop classes, and that should be on the test class, I think.
The first one.
The test class. Now scroll all the way to the bottom.
Yep, the last method.
So let me talk about this for a minute, because I kind of mentioned it, but maybe it was not very clear. So can I have the mouse? A test method has 3 parts. You want to initialize a test, you want to execute your production code, and you want to validate. With the start test and stop test, gives this guy its own set of governor limits. So you have 100 so-called queries. With the start test, stop test, you also have a second counter for this line of code together with these lines of code. So yes, this will count against a so-called query governor limit. So and also this insert will do that, count against your governor limits. But by using the start test, stop test, you get 2 different counters. So if you have a code that is very complex, and you are like in 99 so-called queries of your 100 queries because you're doing something very, very massively complicated, when you test it, you have 3 queries, that goes over the limit of 100. So that's why you have to do start test and stop test, so you do get 2 different counters. They do count, but not on the same counter. Is that good?
So Sorry, just you're saying if I have like say 3 queries, each of them run like 100 times or something. So
Or 3 different methods?
in one method.
Inside one method, okay, inside
Yes.
one method.
So you just say in this case, inside the test, start test and stop test is
Right.
about 200 right there, right?
Sure.
So it's
So what happens inside that line, so the line 30, which does the insert test positions, it will fire a trigger which fires queries and stuff like that. They will count against the governor limits.
okay. That's one limit there. So the line above start test and the line after the stop test count as a different limit.
Correct.
So there's only 2 limits. I can
There's
can do
2 counters,
2
not
counters.
3.
Okay.
2.
No 3.
Because
Only
the
2
first
counters.
part and the last part counts as one single counter.
Okay.
The other counter or group of counters is inside the start test, stop
And
test.
I can't write another start test or and
No,
stop test
no,
in the
no.
same method.
Nice
Okay.
try.
Thank you.
And actually, in business code or business logic or production code, you cannot use start test and stop test if you're hitting governor limits. Nice try. I've tried that before as well, and that didn't work. Who's next?
It's not a question though, but just another best practice thing. The is running test method.
Yes.
I find it pretty useful when trying
is.
to get code coverage for code which you cannot really, go through a test. For
Well, I was starting to agree with you, but then at the last part, I think I am going to disagree. Don't try to do any hacks, and I've seen them all, especially when I was in developer support, of trying to get higher code coverage. That I've seen one way of getting really high code coverage, but then which I'm going to tell you so you don't use it.
So-
is have a method in there with integer I equals 0, I plus plus, I plus plus, I plus plus, I plus plus 3,000 times, and call that method and it will increase your code coverage. The reason for testing, so there's 2 reasons for testing. Number 1, we force you to do code coverage, so you have to do code coverage to deploy the code. But actually, it's not just because of that. The test is going to help you prevent errors later on production and get frustrated users. For example, when we had our code here and it was working, and the last exercise we did at 200, it wasn't really working, and if users are going to load data through data loader, they're going to get frustrated because your code is not working the way. So it's for you, number 1. 2, every release, I didn't mention this, but in every release, we're now in winter 14. When we come to spring 14, we're going to, inside Salesforce, we're going to run everybody's test with the version winter 14. A minute later, we run everybody's tests with spring 14. If there's any difference in the results, then we know that R&D didn't do anything, something wrong, and we'll fix it. So it's also another level of defense for you. So, okay, I lecture already. That's part of the answer. The first part was good, and I was agreeing with you, in which there is another method that I didn't bring it up, which is test that is running. Is running test, right?
Yeah, is running
System
test.
that is running test or something. That will tell you if your business code, this section of the business code is running because it is in a test mode or a live production mode. It used to be the case that we didn't have a way to test callouts to web services. We didn't have the mock thing that we learned today. So you had to do it that way with that method. If I'm running in production, call the web service callout. Else, do this here. So you could test it and validate it. But now, for that particular use case, we don't do it anymore because we we have a better way of testing callouts.
So I was actually talking in the positive sense, not as a hack.
Oh, okay. But, okay, so my comment wasn't directed to you, it was directed to everybody.
So I ran into specific scenarios where, you know, a case was being created using email to case.
Okay.
And then there was a follow-up action required, but you cannot do that action until after 2 minutes since it has been received.
Right.
There are things that you cannot test in a test
I
case.
agree
so
with
for
you
such,
completely.
For such circumstances, when I was stuck at 74%, I opened a case with Salesforce, and the guy said, sorry, I can't help you. That's when I discovered, you know, this method will help me. If I surround it this way, then at least it goes through that line, and I reach my 75%.
Then I agree with you 100%, not just half of it, but
I was just
the
talking in
full way
positive
to
sense
the
as a
end.
best practice.
That was smart. That was 3 smart questions, but we'll just count it as one.
Unfortunately, I'm not really impressed with the recent changes to the testing thing you've done. First of all the code coverage statistics is moved to developer console, which is a very big pain.
I know.
And secondly, this
I
is
totally
not just
agree.
a statement, but my question is, the other day I was stuck at 74%, which is really painful. And I was trying to find out the test which had lesser coverage so that I could work on them. But in developer console, it shows all the classes in alphabetical order. So I wanted to exclude managed packages. So is there a filter to exclude those?
I totally agree with you, and I'm on the same that number, that column should be, and everybody knows what I'm talking about. That column should be back, I think, but I don't have a word on it, that it should be back on there so you can sort it and see like that. I was having exactly the same issue last week, and the developer console shows you the percentage for the classes that you do run. I have a lot of classes that didn't have any code coverage, but I couldn't find them. For now, until hopefully R&D does something. And R&D, are you listening? Please, 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 we beg you, put it back. So the way I did find out, or I was able to work on that, is through running the test in Eclipse. Because in Eclipse gives you the full list of all your classes, which one has code coverage, which one has low code coverage, no code coverage, and high code coverage. So not through the developer console, but through Eclipse, I was able to get that answer. But it should be back on the browser.
Yes,
100,
please.
I agree with you completely.
I think it was the 4th goal is to bulkify your tests to make sure it works in bulk.
Yes.
And it seemed like you did 200 as triggers. You generally chunk it in 200. Is 200 adequate to consider it bulkified, or are there situations where you might want to use 1,000, 5,000 for any reason?
200 is good.
200 and it's bulkified.
200 is good because there's corner cases, but in the majority of cases, the maximum number of records will be 200. Now, the corner case, and this is something that I experienced, is I created a Visualforce page to load an Excel file or a CSV file, and then that had 1,000 records. Then I inserted that, then my trigger ran 5 times with 200 records in one single transaction. But that's a corner case. In the majority of cases, your administrators or users or whatever are going to be loading data through the API, in which if you send more 201 records or more, it will fail. So the web service does not allow you to load more than 200 records. So it's safe to assume, based on that principle, that 200 is a good number.
Okay.
Don't do it for 20, because then they will do it for 50 and it will fail. Do it for 200. But more than 200 is not necessary.
Okay.
Another
Sir.
bulk question. You were showing bulk testing with a for loop. Is there any point to loading CSV and doing bulk testing with a lot of different pieces of data rather than the same piece of data over and over?
Oh, sure. Yeah, like I was explaining before, you can put your data in the static resources and do a test load data, especially when you have weird data, or like most of your cases, you're going to have a lot of ifs for different conditions. If this field is black, but this field is red and this field is green, then in that case, it makes a lot of sense not to do the tests like this, but do it with the static resources. I just did it like this because it's a demo and yeah.
Anything special we should know when combining those two and trying to put a bulk test?
No, you can do a mix and match. If your records are, if your use cases are very simple, you only have, like in this case, the maximum we need to worry about is the department being null or not null. Then it's a simple use case, and then this is a good method. But otherwise, if you have complex data or use cases or whatever, it's better the static resources. How are we doing on time? 20 more minutes?
So just responding to that question, I thought I heard you say when you load the static resources, because I love that idea for loading a whole bunch of interesting records, is it counting each of those records as an insert, so a DML
No.
It does it
no,
for
yeah,
one
no.
for the whole batch. Okay.
Yeah, because otherwise you hit the governor limits on the first line. No.
Yeah, exactly. Okay.
We do it smart. We know how to do it smart. It takes that, it reads into a list of records, and it does an insert on that list of records.
Gotcha. Thanks.
Yep. And it is a beautiful, beautiful thing, that static resources. How many shirts do we have left?
This is probably a very, very simple question. Just I've seen it everywhere. Sorry. So you mentioned about the naming convention back then to say try to name your test class with just that test. However, I noticed that there are so many people who don't necessarily even create class for the test methods. Is it really recommended at all?
So we're talking about the naming convention.
Just like, is it always recommendation to
it is recommended so that when
class.
you see the start over, because I think I'm answering only half of the question. Go ahead, please.
I'm not just wondering if it's always recommended to create a separate class to include all your tests rather than going everywhere.
It's mandatory.
It's mandatory.
Yes, with a new version of Salesforce, Summer 13, I think. It is mandatory that your test methods are outside. Now, if you have old code before Summer 13, then you can have it inside. But if you're going to change the version of that code, then you have to take the test methods out of your class.
Much better.
Yeah. Thank you. And if you take it out, then it's a good idea to have the naming convention that you put the underscore tests next to, so you. Where's the, right here.
One question I had was, now that each class has to have a separate test class,
right?
Is there a way to test private methods? Because if they're private, you can't access them from another class.
Yeah, I had that problem before, but I think what I did was I created the test class was a subclass. Oh no, that will, yeah. This is what I did. The test class was a subclass of my business class, and then I changed it from private to protected, because even if it is private, you cannot see it. Your subclass cannot see it. But making it protected is kind of similar to private. Kind of similar. Nobody outside of your class can see it except if it's a child. Then I was able to test it like that. I think it still works. I haven't done that recently.
What's the difference in region 3 and assignment 3? They're both using for loops in the trigger. Just
what is the difference between? Wait, you're not asking about this code.
Sorry,
what is the difference
between region 2 and region 3?
Region 3.
They're both using for loops to do an insert. Just one's in assign region 3 and one's in the trigger. In exercise 2, the for loop is in the trigger. In exercise 3, the for loop is in the method. What's the difference?
Well, so in exercise 2, we were having one for loop. We were having one for loop in the trigger. In exercise 3, we took that for loop into the class. And you're asking me what's the difference between those two?
Yes, why is one better than the other?
Now I understand your question. Yes, What we were doing was, when we had the loop inside the trigger, we were calling a method that did a SOCL query. So we were doing a SOCL inside a loop. We were doing the SOCL 200 times. When we do it here, when we take it out in here, we do one SOCL query that is going to find all the positions. Is that what it is? No, all the users? What is it finding? All the positions based on the IDs of the position. So it's only one query, not ID equals, but ID in a list. So we only do one query. That was the difference.
We're quite interested in the idea of using the CSV files to load data, but how do you maintain relationships when you have a lot of custom objects and master detail or lookup type relationships between them?
You can't. Sorry. You could probably, no, you could probably do it a little bit with having external fields and stuff like that, but no, it's not. Maybe that's a future, that's something that we should write in ID Exchange. But for now, you could probably try to do something after you load the data, do it on a, or with a external ID to find the proper parents or something, but yeah, no. It's not clean, it's not easy, and it's not always possible, unfortunately. ID Exchange, stable that.
I just had a comment on the accessing private data. There's a test visible annotation that you can add now to private members. I think it was just new in summer 13.
Yes, I've seen that.
Prefix,
do you hear that one?
If you prefix the method or the private member declaration with the @test visible annotation, it becomes visible to test methods.
Yes. It's still private, but
right.
not for a test mode.
Right, so you don't have to hack like you used to be able to get an access.
Yes,
to get
I forgot about that one.
Access.
I forgot about that one.
I should get a T-shirt for that.
You should. You want this one? We ran out of T-shirts. See, you should have asked your question earlier when we had T-shirts.
Are there any plans to move closer to unit testing as opposed to functional testing, maybe mocking frameworks?
Oh, I don't know. No, that.
Similar to like
you're asking about you're asking for if you're doing a future request. I'm the wrong person to asking to. I can only tell you what's there. ID Exchange will probably, but yeah, for now it's functional tests. So we're done? We're good? Bye!